Hey, welcome to another episode of CultureCast with Dustin Homan. Dustin Homan is going to be speaking with the founder of the Cultural Renaissance in Central African Republic, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back to another episode of CultureCast. As I've said many, many times, this is my favorite of all the telecasts that we do. Dustin Homan is the 4-H educator with Purdue University. And Dustin, it's always a pleasure being here talking with you about different parts of the world.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick, and welcome back to our viewers. I appreciate this platform, Patrick. Traveling the world is something that I believe is so important for every person. And in these times that we're living in, we're recording this during the COVID pandemic. Now more than ever, it's still important to fuel those fires and encourage people to travel around the world. And I think one way we can do that is through CultureCast. So we have an incredible guest joining us today. Mr. Robby. He is the gentleman that I met through my work here in Marion County, Indiana, which is where the capital, Indianapolis, is located. So before we get into some of his incredible photos, Robby, welcome. Thank you for your time today. Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Dustin, and thank you, Patrick, for having me today. Once again, my name is Robbie Kongolo. I am originally from the Central African Republic. And I lived in Indiana for about 15 years, but my roots are from the Central African Republic, as I explained. I have the privilege to live a multicultural life for living in the US, in the Central African Republic, but also in France. So I've completed my education in all three of those countries. Completed a graduate degree here at Indiana University. I'm sure you're familiar with this university. And through this process, I had the opportunity to meet fantastic people. I'm going to start with you, Dustin, because you have really helped me put together a tremendous work for the not-for-profit that I put together called Cultural Renaissance. And this organization is basically seeking to change the approach of education, to have an education that is contextual, that is realistic, and that responds to the humanitarian crisis that are in the Central African Republic. With that being said, I look forward to talking a little more about what this country can offer, and if some of my information could be useful for you and the audience, and especially our young generation, I'll be more than happy to give you a little more details.
Thanks, Robby. I appreciate that. And yeah, you have such an interesting and diverse background, and we caught you at a great time too. Because you just returned from the Central African Republic. So you've got some great photos and very relevant and top of your mind stories to be able to share with our viewers about a country I don't think a lot of us know a lot about. So I'm also looking forward to learning. Let's jump into our photos for today. So as I mentioned, Robby has some incredible photos to share with us, but as we do on every CultureCast, we always start out with the flag and with where the country is located. So I heard on the news this morning, the 2021 Olympics in Tokyo are moving forward as planned. So hopefully we'll be able to see this beautiful flag, which is the flag of the Central African Republic. And the Central African Republic is appropriately named because the country is in the center of the continent of Africa. Geographically, the country is about the size of the state of Texas here in the United States, but has a much smaller population than the state of Texas here in the US. The Central African Republic has a population of about 5.9 million people, which would be more closely related to the population of the state of Wisconsin. in doing my research, and Roby, you may be able to speak to this, the country is just full of diversity, different ethnic groups, and also is very blessed with a lot of natural resources, which, as I understand, has also caused some pain and turmoil in the country's past as well. So we look forward to learning a little bit more about that. But Roby, you're our special guest today. Tell us a little bit more about the CAR and its beginnings.
So thank you, Dustin. So in few words, I will not claim to be the expert of the Central African Republic. I have to be very honest to share the little information that I do have. But it is with pride that I will speak about this country, starting with the flag, which his device is unity, dignity, and work. In French, it is unité, dignité, et travail. Well, this flag has been the pride of many Central African since its independence. And then the Central African Republic is independent from France through the leadership of Barthélemy Boganda, who is the founder of this nation. As you can see here, we can briefly skim through his achievements. But what I would love to say is this founder lives in the heart of every Central African citizen. And here we have the opportunity to see what we call a mausolée, and in recognition of his contribution to the country and who he represents. So what I would like to say here in regards to the Central African Republic, and then as you mentioned, it is a country that is rich in diversity, but also rich in resources, natural resources. Per kilometer square meter, to be very honest, there is some natural resources. And then we have the tendency to sometimes focus only on let's say, minerals with, I would say, diamond, gold, uranium, and so forth. But let's remember that the Central African Republic is laying and sleeping on the bed of water, which is crossed by many rivers and lakes. Every single provinces is crossed by at least 2 to 3 rivers, which means the soil, it is so fertile, so rich for agriculture and over industries or enterprises.
Which I think it's a good transition, Roby, into the organization that you are helping to advise, right? Tell us about that.
Yes, so thank you. So I had the opportunity in the past year to my path crossed this organization called Water for Good, which is doing some fantastic work in the Central African Republic. So as I mentioned about the underground soil of the Central African Republic filled with water, this organization knew that through the humanitarian crisis that the Central African Republic is facing, water is at the basis of the determinant of health. So if we talk about determinant of health, we're talking about food, agriculture, housing, security, work, and all of that. And this organization knew that water is so important. So this organization, who has been in the Central African Republic for over 20 years, now since 2004, this organization has been focusing on distributing water through the implementation of water wells throughout the nation. Now they are focusing on one specific region right now called Mamberikadi, which is on the west in the border of Cameroon. Well, they drill wells, and after drilling the wells, they invest in the human capital of the region to manage the distribution of this water, to ensure that the community have safe drinking water, so that boys and girls do not have to spend hours to go and get water to bring it back. And then we know that when this young population, boys and girls, are going to get that water, they're not at school. So this is where I'm so thankful for this organization that is investing its donors and his heroes, that we want to call heroes, funding to be able to make a lasting impact and sustainable impact in the life of many women, men, and children, especially girls in the Central African Republic.
Yeah, and Roby, I'm glad you mentioned the youth piece, because we hope that youth are watching this and learning about different countries and learning how to travel. But this is also an opportunity for our guests like you to share with youth here in the US what life looks like for someone their age in a different country. So this is one of the photos that you shared with me, and I think it's just so powerful. Tell our youth here in the US, what is life like for a young person in CAR?
So this is this is a great question, but there are so many answers to this. There is no one unique answer to this. My perspective is that just looking at this picture here, that child's place should be in a place where he is safe, he is learning, he is growing and developing properly. But unfortunately, the humanitarian crisis in the Central African Republic are leading many families to focus on the survival mode, or how do they put food in the plate for their children. And then children are sometimes called to do extra work for the household. It is hurting, but for me, this is telling me that the nation and the population are not giving up to hope. They are not giving up to hope. That child's place, it's certainly with his family or at school at this point to learn to grow. However, the difficulty of the nation are showing this picture that I took actually in the rural side of the country, because this is not in the capital. This is very rural. So that child went certainly in the woods to collect the firewoods, because this is firewood to be able to use that for cooking at home, which means mom or dad are certainly striving or fighting somewhere to bring either the vegetables or the meat to be able to be cooked at home. So while this is very painful for me to see, because as an educator, I still believe that, and that's why my organization, and I believe with the partnership of 4-H, will be able to change that dynamic, where we are aspiring for a better future for this community, for these children. I don't want to say poor children, for the simple fact that they are bringing their contribution in the life of their family, but also they are bringing what people don't see as their talent and creativity. When we talk about creativity, sometimes we are not focusing on what we call divergent thinking. It's looking at the problem and finding different solution for that problem. So when I look at this child here, he has not been taught to create this little car that we see him playing. He does not have toys. He does not have the means or the financial support to buy toys, but he has enough tools to recycle material to create that little engine, which I believe it is fantastic. This is ingenuity to this peak. Although, how can we capitalize with this to prepare his future? And I believe through my organization, I don't want to say my organization, our organization and our future partners will be able to use their talent through, and also let me mention this, through an agricultural program, to be able to use that talent to benefit not only the child, their family, and the nation.
Thank you. And you make such an important point there, Roby. I want to reiterate for our young people watching that, yes, it's true. We are very blessed that when we come home from school, we come into a home with a roof. There's a little machine on the wall called a thermostat where we can adjust our temperature. For many of us, we press a button and we can heat up our food. As the last photo showed, there's youth around the world who don't have those luxuries and have to go help collect firewood so that they can cook their meals. But on the other side, there's also similarities between youth here and around the world. Like this young man here, they're creative, they want to play, they want to have fun, and they think of solutions in ways that we as adults don't. And like you said, I think it's important through our organizations to encourage this. So I'm just really glad you put these photos in here. And they're very, very powerful photos. So, and we're talking about the natural resources of this country, and you shared this photo with us. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, this is just quite surprising. We live in a tropical weather, and then the Central African Republic, when we talk about diversity, its fauna is just so rich. And some of the species of animals that we cannot encounter here in the US, unless we go to zoos or we go to, I would say, pet shops and so forth. I had the opportunity to have this parrot, c'est un perroquet gris, as we say en français, that end up, landing on one of the fences that we do have. And for me, that day, I thought it was just a blessing to see one of these guys come over, just to show that the country is rich, so rich in things that we do not expect. But we have to be on the soil to fully understand how much diversity is there, how much potential is there. And when I'm talking about potential is, we have sources of vigor in this country, but how do we capitalize with that sources of vigor? And when I'm talking about capitalizing, it is not necessary in a monetary sense, is how do we exploit, respect, and make a good use of these resources in a way that it is sustainable for the nation, sustainable for the population, and sustainable for the economy of this country. Let's remember that in 25 years of conflict, many infrastructures, if not all, have suffered from 25 years of conflict, and the nation is today has the opportunity to see what is happening to change this story. And then many non-for-profit organizations are trying to pitch in, but we still believe that the diversity and the richness of the country comes from the local people that will change this. And I'm just going to look at this path, looking at this picture here. You can see the contrast between paved road that I believe 25 years ago was concrete, correct? But now in 25 years, we are finding this, and this is leading to the rural country. But within this picture, you can also see that there's technology. As you see, there's electrical pole that shows that electricity is going there. Electricity has been there. What is the potential that this electricity is probably distributed equally for the population? What are the infrastructure that we can have in place that would support this or finance this electricity? So what we're looking at is so much potential. We have the fauna, we have the natural environment, and we as organization, as people, can have an impact in this, in the life of many people in the Central African Republic.
Yeah, and speaking of the infrastructure piece you were sharing with us earlier, just how important something as simple as a bridge is. Tell us about that in this photo, Robbie.
So as I was traveling to visit a partner who was a great partner who's looking forward to invest in the non-for-profit cure culture of Renaissance, I had to go from one prefecture that we call one province to the other, and we were separate from the only path to get from this province to the other was this bridge. And this bridge will survive for only 5 years at the most, which means if this bridge is not there, the access to these prefecture will be very limited because, as I mentioned, each prefecture are crossed by several rivers or lakes, and then this is one of these axes that shows that the infrastructure needs improvement. It is wood, it is practical for now, but it is not sustainable. So this is one of the challenges we might face as we travel through the country. But this does not stop the Central African citizen, despite the difficulties. They are finding ways of communicating with each other, working with each other. And then I believe through our work, we have a chance to have an impact in the sustainable development, including in the infrastructure. Because let me explain or give you a little detail that I have as part of the educational program. It is a education program that is framed to invest in the human capital, but not only in the human capital, but let's look at an education that is a vocational education, education that try to respond to the need of the population, but the need of infrastructure. So if we want an education, if we want business to kick in, and we do not have, I would say, infrastructure such as roads, therefore the education is part of investing in how do we call this, the engine. En français, it will be le génie civil. Le génie civil would translate to engineering, because this is engineering. It is to the Central African Republic population to be having the talent, the knowledge, to be able to invest in this, to be able to change. And again, this is mainly focusing on the rural side of the country. The capital will be completely different. They have their own system to be able to solve this issue. But thank you, Dustin, for this transition to this cool building. As you can see, some of the infrastructure have been maintained despite the humanitarian crisis. However, COVID-19, just like anywhere around the world, has a tremendous impact on the health and on the health of the population. So this school was vacated since March. So therefore, as a prevention, no children, no teachers were allowed to go to school to teach. However, we can see that the preservation has been maintained. And that's towards, that's before leaving this prefecture. So I had the opportunity to see this. And that's for me a reminder that there is more than hope when we're trying to do the work, what we're trying to do. And I think, Dustin, you'll be very happy to hear this. This is a school that we have visited, and I had a former minister of the education that is so excited to merge our effort, to merge our energy and resources to be able to implement an educational, agricultural educational program under their this small district.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear that. And Roby,
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that, you know, in a year, 2 years, whenever, we have you back on this show and we've got photos of 4-H members out in front of this school, you know, with a garden and maybe with animals and engineering different things. It brings me so much excitement. Roby, we only have a few minutes left, but I do want to make sure that we highlight this photo and story before we conclude. Tell us about this.
So when we look at the Central African Republic, we have to understand that it has been in our tradition to be patriarchal society. But we need to understand that women in the Central African Republic, especially entrepreneurs, are the one that's making the country function. So I'm going to give you an example that is very hard to hear, but during the military and ethnic conflict where men fled part of the capital and certain region, the women were left. And then the women were the one feeding the population through their businesses, their entrepreneurship. And then here I had the opportunity to meet this fantastic lady who is, in fact, investing agriculture and transforming raw agricultural product into a product that could be preserved and sold and creating an economy for the nation. So this lady here, I would love to give you an example, is focusing on transforming the raw product into product that could be preserved and sold and exported. And for example, she would take the number one product that the Central African consume every day. It is cassava. And in cassava, we consume not only the roots, but also the leaves. But the leaves, when we consume them usually raw or fresh that we cooked. Unfortunately, I did not get a chance to show you one of the meal, but it's quite delicious. But you use the roots as condiment also, but the condiment could be provided in form of powder, but also consumed with just as a vegetable. And then her job and her enterprise, one of many of the enterprises, to transform this from powder to also transform this into sticks of cassava that is used to eat the food. But she does much more than that with different species, different vegetables, and so on. So I thought it would be very important to recognize what women are doing to the contribution of this country.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you put this photo in here and the importance of women in the history of the Central African Republic. So Robbie, as our time is winding down, I like to end. We're gonna have to skip some of your beautiful photos. Again, hopefully we can have you back. But I'm gonna end on this photo, and I'd like for you to answer this question for our viewers. Why should they visit the Central African Republic?
Well, that's a great question. And then I would like to smile when I hear this question for the simple fact that it is a welcoming land to start with so much potential. So if we go back to many of the pictures that we saw throughout this short presentation, you can only see hope, greenery, space, and construction. So we are only seeing potential. And then when I see potential is this nation lays on millions of resources, natural resources, but human resources, because that's what we have the most. And then let's remember, the population is very young. So this nation only seeks for a better future. So it is through your visit, so that when you go there, you can witness firsthand the beauty of this nation, the beauty of the heart of these people, because welcoming is probably the best thing that they do have. We cannot only focus on the humanitarian crisis, but to be able to raise the standard, it's what do we have in our heart to make sure that this population, this rural community has a chance to blossom also, because they blossom, they shine, and they just want people to just remind them that they have the potential to shine in return. And then I'm very excited to have spent these few minutes with you. And this picture here reminds me of, behind me, it is the biggest farming, I would say, palm tree farming in the Central African Republic. And the president of this organization is just so willing to work with us. It is called Palme d'Or, who is one of our partners for the agricultural education program we're trying to put together.
Well, Robbie, I want to thank you for ending with a message of hope for our viewers, and to our CultureCast viewers. Thank you for tuning in. We hope that you'll stop by next month to explore another part of this big, beautiful world that we live in. I want to say a special thanks to Patrick and Sarah for your work behind the scenes, and most of all to you, Mr. Robbie. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to continuing in our partnership with you. Again, thanks for tuning in.